What is the grid system? The grid system is a responsive, mobile-first grid that's composed of columns. It scales up to 12 columns as the screen size increases. Also, the grid system is the structure that's going to allow to create nice responsive layouts. Just like this one, which is the demo.html files that we're going to use a lot as an example. So we can see that when we shrink the size of the screen, both the layout and the content are adjusting to the size of the screen. Let's have a look at the grid and see concretely what the grid system is made of. On the first line, we have 12 columns. Those columns are divs. And by looking at the code, we have a div with the class of row that itself includes other divs with the class of call-md-1 for one column. What does it mean? We're going to look at the grid options to understand the meaning and the purpose of the class prefix call-md. So here it is. We have the grid options that present the class prefixes for all types of screen sizes, for the tablets, mobile phones, desktop, and large screen. The number that follows the class prefix will define the number of column or columns in one div. We're going to look at another example on the grid. On the second line, for example, we have two divs next to each other. One div on the left with a class of call-md8 for 8 columns, and another one on the right with a class of call-md4 for 4 columns. The number that you set after the class prefix, which can be between 1 and 12, will define the layout of your site. We'll have a chance to see that more in depth with demonstrations and example in the next lecture. We have other class prefixes. So first, for the small devices like the mobile phone, we have call-xs. We have also a class prefix for the tablet, like an iPad, for example, and that's going to be call-sm. And for the large screen, that's going to be call-lg. By default, on a small screen like an iPhone, for example, or any other small devices like a smartphone, the divs will occupy the full width of the screen, meaning that they will be stacked on each other. This is the mobile-first approach. Let's see that in action. So we're going to check out our template example, on which we have on the first line two divs with a class of call-xs-6 for 6 columns on each side. And we're going to check out now the source code. We have first a div with a class of row that wraps two other divs with a class of call-xs6 for 6 columns. These lines of code define the layout of the site of the template that we've just seen. The grid system approach is mobile first, but by applying a style specifically for the small devices screen with the class prefix of call-xs, this will override the default. And we're going to see that in action. We'll see that when we shrink the size of the screen, the two divs will remain. They're not going to be stacked on each other. I'm going to make another demonstration of the mobile-first approach by changing the class prefix of those two divs. So I'm going to change from call-xs to call-md for both, meaning that the style will apply to the desktop view and higher. And by viewing the result on the browser, we're going to reload. Now the two divs are stacked on each other for the small device view. I'm going to now change the source code to the original version. So by changing the class prefix to call-xs for both, and we're going to check in the view again in the browser, and by reloading the page again, it's back to two divs next to each other with 6 columns in each div. Mobile first also means that whatever style you're going to apply to the mobile view, this will apply to the small devices view and higher. Meaning that if you don't apply any style for the bigger screen, the style for the smaller screen will prevail. I'm going to make an example right now by applying a style for each screen size. So first for the tablet view, by applying the class of call-sm. And after changing the class prefix, I will also change the number of columns by setting 8 columns for the first div and 4 for the second div. I'm going to proceed the same way now for the desktop view, and that's going to be the class prefix of call-md. And here I'm going to do reverse. I'm going to set 4 columns on the left and 8 columns on the right. Finally, for the large screen, so I'm going to use the class prefix call-lg and not md, so I'm going to change that to lg. And I'm going to use a number of columns of 6, just like the small screen view. So let's see how this looks in the browser now. So by reloading the page, we have the same number of columns for the large screen view, because we have a class of call-lg and 6, so that's 6 columns on each side. But we'll see that when we decrease the size of the screen, now we have 4 columns on the left and 8 columns on the right, and that is for the desktop view. As we can see in the source code, we have 8 and 4. Now we're going to see for the tablet view, so as soon as we're going to reach the breaking point of the tablet view, which is about 768 pixel wide, that's going to switch to 8 columns on the left side and 4 columns on the right side. And by shrinking more until we reach the point of the small device view, we have 6 columns on each side, as we've defined in our source code. You may wonder how the browser is able to figure out the size of the screen and which class prefix to apply. And for that, you need to add a meta tag on top of the page in the head section, and this one is the viewport. This viewport meta tag must be included in all your HTML documents of your responsive site project. What you need to keep in mind is that the grid is controlled by the viewport size via the media queries, and as the browser width gets wider, the different columns class will overwrite the previous ones. For example, at the width of an iPhone, the class prefix call-xs will become active, and if you stretch the browser out wide, then the large screen, call-lg, if used, becomes active and overrides the smaller size. What's coming next is more example and demonstration of the grid. So see you then.